What's a local rumor you heard as a kid that turned out to be true years later? Girl in my high school was rumored to have been dating one of the teachers who was married. This was probably true because after graduation, the teacher had retired, divorced his wife and married the girl. A girl in my high school was rumored to be sleeping with the school resource officer. Turned out it was true. We all found out because he had molested her 5 or 6-year-old sister, and the girl told his wife, and the wife was going to turn him in, so he murdered his wife and went on the run. He was on America's Most Wanted and the U.S. Marshals Top 10 Most Wanted list for a long time. Like he was only removed from the top 10 list recently, within the past year or so. Officer Daniel Ayers, I believe it was. The kids would tell stories, and one that reoccurred was about the girl that killed her parents with scissors. In a town of 300 in an isolated area, nothing ever happened, so even as a kid it was easy to dismiss. My senior year, my class found out that our teacher told us all the details. He was the only person in the county with a color camera, so he was drafted as the official photographer. It was during a cold snap, so by the time state police arrived the scene was frozen. The temperature was so low that our teacher's camera froze up and he had to fake it, then return later with the sheriff to retake the pictures. The girl had been molested by dad, and the mother knew. So one night stabbed them in their sleep with a pair of scissors. She dragged the bodies to the garage and attempted to burn them, but the only thing she had that was combustible was some perfume. She then came up with a story and ran to the neighbors. A few years ago I shared this on Reddit and did a little research. Turns out she was sent to the state mental hospital. She was released on a temporary insanity plea. However, she was raped at the hospital and got pregnant. She has a Facebook page, but I stopped there. I just know she is living in state and didn't want to dredge up more. When I posted on Reddit before, I shared an article that had her name and that became searchable. She had a sister who was away in college. The sister had a daughter who contacted me. The sisters never talked again, but the niece was raised on a different story. She grew up hearing that her aunt was a heroin addict, no hard drugs were possible in our community then. She was told her sister just snapped and the parents were saints who took care of their problem child. One of my 4th grade teachers seemed a bit creepy and loved taking pictures of his class. A few years later, he got busted with a few gigabytes of CP on his computer. And this was in the 90s. Much later, after I had finished high school and college, I decided to Google his name again. He got out of prison after 8 or 9 years, and then within a year got busted again and immediately went back. There was a rumor in middle school that our band director had fathered his adopted daughter's child. He was eventually moved to the elementary school and often seen with children sitting on his lap, which still grosses me out to this day. It came out years later that he had indeed raped his daughter and gotten her pregnant, and last I heard he was in prison. In 2008 or so, a kid was shot at the park by adult drug dealers. The news and reports stated he was some kingpin in the weed trade and had made tens of thousands before getting popped. His parents denied. Until investigation found out he started selling to pay his parents' mortgage, and had in fact been selling weed in large quantities. Kid was 15. Edit: since this got traction, found an article, it was 2006 and this is an early one that came out before more was known. This article says hydrocodone for $500, but later I believe it was revealed he'd been selling all sorts of stuff. The article definitely paints him as a suburban woe is me I got mixed in with the wrong crowd type kid. The park we used to play football at used to be a cemetery. They exhumed all the coffins and moved them years before I was born. We'd freak each other out, especially at night, saying there were still bodies buried there. One day we were playing and they were doing some groundskeeping work and they found a coffin. The state came out and found 30 more. We were actually playing on top of hallowed ground. In middle school, our janitor was this kinda mean, gross dude who kids were real mean to. Making fun of him and giving him shit nicknames like Dirty Dan. But he also happened to be one of my best friends / middle school girlfriend's dad. The rumors kids threw around were that he was a pedophile and child predator. I went to their house many times and even stayed over once or twice. He was an asshole and so was his son, and the house was absolutely disgusting, but my friend needed company so we didn't just leave. It was a sad house and she was clearly sad, but all she ever said was that he was an angry guy. Years later, I've lost contact with my friend and we've all graduated high school. The summer after graduation, the janitor and his son were both arrested for CP and assault. I never felt so nauseous as I did reading that article. I wish I knew how she was doing. A vagrant-looking man used to collect cans from local parks and whatnot. Imagine someone pushing a shopping cart in tattered clothing. Rumor was he was generationally wealthy, and when he passed away he left a fortune to the park and rec department to update facilities. We used to have a local homeless lady, supposedly a Vietnam Army nurse. Her experiences there ruined her and she refused help from her wealthy family. It was all rumors though until she passed. Her family turned out to be the people who owned UTZ potato chips. They paid for her funeral since now she wasn't around to refuse any money or help anymore. Everyone at my school knew someone who told them that this one house just down the road from the school was owned by a locally known drug dealer and it was his emergency hideout house. Years later I was driving past and laughed at how ridiculous the story was. 2 weeks after that the house was on the news with armed police surrounding it. Turns out it really was this drug hideout and the guy was involved in way more stuff than just that. They found drugs, weapons and evidence of a human trafficking ring in there. The house got mysteriously burned down while his court case was going on and has been a burned out empty lot ever since. I've heard about 2 different teachers at my high school being creepy and they both have been fired for inappropriate contact with students. Same at my middle school. He was the drama teacher and also the high school football coach. He would get a couple of the boys drunk and tell them he was getting a stripper. Well, he would blindfold them, put on a wig, and would molest them. They obviously though it was a woman as he would brush them with the wig. He killed himself while on house arrest awaiting trial. There was a rumor at my high school that the building down the way was a cult. It wasn't unheard of to dare people to go over there and then you'd end up being followed or sometimes invited to dinner. Turns out, it was the headquarters of the cult the Duggars were in, Institute in Basic Life Principles. I was watching the documentary and my mind was blown, because all the high school rumors had been true. Had something similar happen, grew up in a beach town in California and one year these Christian hippie types started rolling around passing out pamphlets and inviting people to the new restaurant they were opening. I look at my friend after they walk away, and I say that's a fucking cult for sure and ha's were shared and it became a running joke. We ended up going to the restaurant multiple times. They had really good food, good ambience and became kind of a staple restaurant for locals, and they never pushed any agenda on patrons. Cut to a decade later, I'm living in Vegas and meet a coworker from the same area I grew up. Turns out she grew up in that cult and escaped when she was 23, a few years before I met her. We ended up becoming kinda close and she shared some of what it was like. When I was running around the beach getting approached by these dudes when I was probably 13, she was working at the restaurant, without pay, under strict rules. Turns out the cult is known for child labor violations, been accused of abuse multiple times, makes everyone work in for profit business for free. And I'm sure she just barely scratched the surface for me. It was a local urban legend that this huge, old, and abandoned house was haunted because like a century ago there was a murder there. Kids would freak each other out over it, tell ghost stories, sneak onto the property, whatever. I thought it was just that, an urban legend about an abandoned house. Nope. In the early 1900s the husband and wife were found dead in the house. It was never solved, but the son was suspected because he was missing and never found. No one moved into it after that and it's sat empty since. I only found out because they planned to tear it down to build apartments on the property 2 years ago, but the local community rallied to preserve it. That if you rode bikes or four-wheelers down this certain trail an old man would come after you and attack you. A few years later, some kids were riding four-wheelers down that trail and an old guy shot and killed them both. Damnedest thing, they had already left his property before he caught up to them, and he killed them on public land. I'm pretty sure he died in prison a few years ago. Was this in Southeast Tennessee? Well, I went and looked at your profile and got my answer. I grew up there. It was up on one of the mountains. I remember a few kids from school saying we weren't supposed to go through his property to get to the waterfalls, and then my dad told my brother and me the guy had been raising Cain with all of his neighbors about cutting through his land and not to do it anymore. That's when I took it seriously. Rumor about a local businessman who tried to end it all and was rescued. Some weeks later he ran into a burning building and rescued 2 young children, sustaining severe burns in the process. A few months ago I saw him in the pub on the green. All of the skin in his face and hands had melted and he had skin grafted everywhere. Happiest man in the pub. What a hero. When I was in high school there were rumors about a kid in my class molesting a bunch of kids. He was a very weird kid. Everyone assumed it wasn't true and just a mean rumor. During a class another kid said something to him about it. He angrily shouted, "Nothing has been proven yet." The entire class just stopped and awkwardly stared at him. That was 30-some years ago. He is still in prison for molesting dozens of kids while working in his church's nursery. That's disgusting. It's sad that parents trust to put their children in places to look after them while they can't, but disgusting pieces of shit like him ruin lives all for nothing. It really was so terrible. Apparently, like it often is, he was abused quite badly as a child. I am not making excuses for him, but I hope his victims are able to break the cycle. Always heard rumors that this kid who I rode BMX with, his dad was a high-ranking member of the Hells. One day we're over there, years later, chatting shit around the fire in his backyard, and about 70 patched members arrived at the house for a meeting. They bought us a shitload of beer and told us to find a park to drink it in for a few hours while they had their meeting. I have two. Both about elderly men. First, there was an elderly man that could be seen walking all over town. Long gray beard. Usually seen in tattered clothes. Walking Man or the Silver Bullet were nicknames for him. The rumor was he was actually really wealthy, but lots of people just assumed he was homeless because he was always walking, carrying groceries or whatever. Well, about a year before he passed, it came out that he was actually one of the wealthiest residents in our town when he donated millions to local youth programs and schools. Turns out, he just liked walking a lot and placed no value on material things like clothes and cars. Second, there was an elderly man who was actually homeless. The rumor was that he drank himself crazy some years back and just never got help. He was in and out of jail a bunch but always seemed to be given some slack by law enforcement. This truth is tragic. He did drink himself crazy out of necessity. He was a paramedic. One night he responded to a wreck that turned out to be his wife and daughter had been hit by a distracted driver speeding on a narrow road. Neither survived. Understandably, he was never okay after that. He would sometimes check the pizza shop I used to manage for spare slices. Broke my heart that all I could do was offer him some free pizza. Hope you can rest in peace now, Red. Our local China buffet was using illegal immigrants as wait staff and then trafficking them across town to a massage parlor they own that gave the old rub and tug. Huge scandal when it happened, but it was hushed up pretty quickly. The restaurant reopened some months after under new management. There was a massage parlor that was suspected of human trafficking, sex industry, in my area, so the police investigated. It only made the news because the police made 47 undercover visits, using taxpayer money to finance the investigation. There was a rumor that a couple of guys after a party took a drunk girl and assaulted her in the car on the way to a field. She died by suffocation, and to hide the evidence they boys put firecrackers in her mouth to destroy the dental evidence. Then they buried her and came to school the next day like nothing happened. Well, it was true, as my film teacher told us the story in detail and showed mugshots. I was hoping these criminals landed in jail, but I don't know if I found the right story. It's similar, but the details show that it was very deliberate. The guys drugged the girl after she rejected one of them. She wasn't already drunk, and one strangled and beat her. Decided not to link to the story in case it is the right one, and you didn't want to mention the location. They were convicted of murder and sent to prison, but I couldn't find out if they were still there. It's interesting that, if it is the same story, the rumor mill changed it a bit to make it seem more like a crime of opportunity that spiraled out of control, rather than a planned attack. That a quiet and polite dude we knew growing up was a murderous and ruthless gang leader. We used to go to his parties, we saw him on the town and always exchanged pleasantries. We would see him at the bar, and there was little indication he was not to be messed with, until one day we bumped into him in a parking lot. Again, exchanging pleasantry, "How are you? What's going on this weekend?" etc. A truck pulled up a couple of spots over. He said just a second, and calmly walked over to talk to the guy. A short conversation ensued, and he opened the driver door and started pummeling the guy. Like on top of him in the driver's seat, punching down. We were stunned. After a short while, he got out of the truck and walked back, to calmly finish his conversation with us like nothing happened. We saw the truck pull away, so we think the guy lived. A few years afterwards, more rumors surfaced about him, and it made sense that they were true, until one day his arrest made international headline news. He received a heavy sentence for a ton of different crimes, likely won't ever be free, and his affiliates are still doing business. Kid in my 3rd grade class was always late to school. I'm talking he once showed up to school 5 minutes before classes were released to go home. The rumor among parents and teachers was that his mom was an alcoholic and the dad lived a couple towns over, so he often had to wait for his dad to take him or take care of his mom until she was well enough to drive. This was a private school with no bus. She died of liver failure a few months ago, according to Facebook. Makes it so much more fucked up that everyone knew, including the teacher, and didn't have any sympathy for him. I distinctly remember the teacher telling him on multiple occasions that it was his responsibility to show up on time. He was 8, was he supposed to drive himself? Makes me so sad, and I hope he's doing okay now. The most popular boy in middle school disappeared after 7th grade. Literally, his parents sold their house and moved to a new house nearby, but pretty secluded. He enrolled in a really expensive private school and cut off all ties with his friends. At the same time, a really popular male social studies teacher went on leave. Rumors circulated that the boy was molested by the teacher, and that's why they were both gone. The other popular kids got really pissed when people said that because they really liked the teacher and the kid. Eventually, people stopped talking about it. Fast forward to senior year in high school. He shows up at our prom as the date of his 5th grade girlfriend. First time anyone had seen him in years. Apparently, he reached out to the girl to ask if she had a date because he wanted to see all his old friends one last time. Apparently, he was indeed molested by the teacher during tutoring sessions at the teacher's home. The school district and his parents agreed to bury it in exchange for tuition to the private school. He never wanted to leave and really resented his parents for it. By the time prom rolled around, he was 18 and they couldn't stop him. He wanted to set the story straight and let everyone know he was sorry for just disappearing. This is a little more lighthearted. But when I was in elementary school, probably like 3rd grade, all the kids in my class would joke about how our primary teacher and our Spanish teacher liked each other. We were all little kids, so of course it was just dumb little kids joking about around. That is, until a few years later when I was in middle school and I found out my old teacher and Spanish teacher recently got married. In middle school we had teams. Each team was a group of students who would rotate together through the same schedule. My team in 7th grade all decided that our social studies teacher and math teacher would be a good fit. We all tried so hard to get them together. Girls would say to the math teacher about how they thought social studies teacher was so cool and smart, and boys would say similar things to the social studies teacher about the math teacher. When we came back for 8th grade, there was a rumor they started dating over the summer break. By end of 8th grade they were officially open and dating, and by 9th grade they were married. When we got to around 11th grade, the SS teacher started teaching history at the high school, and he confirmed that a bunch of 7th graders got him to start looking at his fellow teacher a little differently and decided why not ask her out. There was this asshole in my junior high gym class, real bully type. And when he would act out, everyone would ridicule him for his mother being a crack whore, and we would laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. Well, it turned out it was true. There was a public confirmation in the paper, and his bullying made a lot more sense because it turned out his home life was what you would expect from someone having a crack whore mother, and no one talked about it anymore, and we did not laugh so much anymore. Ironically, I think he felt so ashamed when everyone found out, that he actually stopped being such a dickhead. There was a kid in my middle school class who was a real dick to everyone, struggled with even simple class work, and was good at sports but fought so much they wouldn't hardly let him play. One day he pushed too far, and the whole class decided to mock him for the jersey he wore to school every day, and how he only wore undershirts and the same 2 pairs of pants. No gym clothes either, and a ratty pair of shoes. Turns out his parents were alcoholic shitpiles, and he lived with his very old grandmother and basically raised himself. Couldn't afford clothes and barely got enough from her social security to feed the both of them. Found out when me and a couple friends found him sobbing in the bushes after school because he didn't want to go home and worry his granny. Some guys ended up buying him some clothes, and helped him get some cleats to play soccer. My mom let me buy him lunches on my account too, since the free school lunch was basically a piece of bread with half a slice of cheese and a wilted apple. Dude is a financial manager now and doing well.